Morant with a running start. Elevate! Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness!
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now a three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant! Oh, he hit it! Jamorant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. We still have 2 weeks to go until the NBA draft, but on today's episode, I'm going to talk about some center names that I've mentioned on previous episodes as possible fits for the Grizzlies who have reportedly been made available. I'm also going to talk about some reports about teams looking to trade into the top 10 that might be good trade partners for the Grizzlies. Also, if we have time, I'm going to talk about the 2 games last year where the Grizzlies had all of their guards and wings healthy and available. And I'm going to remind you what happened in those games and what the rotation actually looked like in case you have forgotten. Before we get to all of it, just want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. If you want to play fantasy sports for cash, you can do that with Underdog Fantasy. You can also get excited for the NFL season and do some best ball drafts. You can play daily fantasy against your friends. You can pick highers or lowers. I've been doing that during the NBA Finals. And now if you sign up with my promo code FBBF, Underdog will match your opening deposit up to $250 and also give you a free bonus pick. So if you want to try out Underdog, do it now and use that promo code FBBF. And again, they will match your opening deposit up to $250. All right, let's start with some of these reports. And of course, take all these reports with a grain of salt. Lots of these things could be smoke screens. Lots of these things could be poorly sourced. But hey, we're still going to talk about them. Some of the names that have been recently reported as being available that I thought were interesting and worth talking about are Kevon Looney, John Collins, and Clint Capella. All of these names, we knew, you could get those guys if you really wanted them, but the degree to which apparently they are available, I think, is notable. Let's start with Clint Capella. Clint Capella, obviously we circled him because of the Hawks having the first pick in the draft and likely or possibly taking Sarr or even taking donovanclingan and thus not having really any need for Clint Capella. The issue with Clint Capella, he's aging. He makes maybe more money than you would like to pay him, but he immediately makes the Grizzlies better if he's on the team. And if the acquisition cost is super low, that's something I think you would have to pursue to match the salary. That's the big issue. Matching the salary, I think you'd have to pick up Luke Kennard's team option and then also offer them Zaire Williams or John Conchar. Now, that doesn't immediately reduce the Hawks' salary for next season, so maybe that isn't exactly what they want, but it gets them something. It gets them something for Clint Capella, so maybe that's enough to make that happen. Also, he's not a center, but because of some luxury tax concerns for the Hawks, they've made DeAndre Hunter available. DeAndre Hunter is an interesting one, and he's a player, honestly, I'm very interested in for the Grizzlies. Not a center, but he's a wing with size who can score. He can shoot. He can space the floor. If DeAndre Hunter made, let's say, Luke Kennard money, no one would be upset about DeAndre Hunter as an NBA player. The only thing people talk about with him is maybe him being overpaid. I think he'd be a great fit on the Grizzlies. You still would need to acquire a center in that situation, but I would be super interested in acquiring DeAndre Hunter if the cost wasn't very much. Again, similar issue with Clint Capella. The Grizzlies issue would be, how do you pay him and all your other players? You could, again, similar situation, try to match the contracts with Luke Kennard and Zaire or Santi Aldama or John Conchar. I don't know what the Hawks would want for him. Of course, it would be easier to just trade like the Marcus Smart contract, but Marcus Smart for DeAndre Hunter, not really a fair trade. You would be looking for something else back from the Hawks, but maybe you would get something else back from the Hawks to do that. But like a guy like DeAndre Hunter, that to me is one of those market inefficiencies where I think good teams should be interested in exploiting that market inefficiency, which is picking up useful players, even if they are making too much salary. Like you say, $21 million, that's too much for DeAndre Hunter. Yeah, sure, but like he's good. At least he's a useful player, so I'd be interested, or I would not be mad at all if the Grizzlies picked up a guy like that, because that's a guy who would slot very nicely into your best lineups. This guy can play next to Ja and Desmond. Oh, and by the way, Marcus and Jaren. He could be a smallish ball 4. Like maybe that's his best position even. So like that's super interesting to me. But speaking of the centers, so Capella obviously available. And then Kevon Looney. The Warriors, according to Tim Kawakami, are going to waive Kevon Looney. This may be if, they're unable to trade him. Looney, a guy I'd identified as being a useful big to have in your rotation. He is a fantastic rebounder. He, of course, is a very good offensive rebounder. We saw that up close and personal in the playoffs 2 years ago. The issue with him, of course, is he is kind of going downhill rapidly. And the question being how much of that was just maybe them thinking the fit with like Trace Jackson Davis last year was a little bit better. And how much of it was him, just his health declining. And he's always had some kind of knee issues. That's why he fell in the draft. But like, that is a player that I think a lot of good teams are going to want to kick the tires on. And with the Grizzlies' extreme need for front court help, you look at Kevon Looney and think, well, if they're going to waive him, we could maybe just get him for free. And would that be an avenue the Grizzlies want to go? You could take him into the Steven Adams traded player exception. Maybe you wouldn't want to waste the traded player exception on a guy like Kevon Looney, but like he only makes $8 million, which frankly is not that much money. He makes $8 million for this coming season. The Warriors, if they waive him, would only owe him $3 million of that contract. So, like, that's an interesting option for the Grizzlies. Even if he gets waived and then he clears waivers, then that's an option, I think, to sign with, maybe a taxpayer mid-level exception. That's a guy I think you would possibly want to pursue. So Kevon Looney, a guy I've talked about or theorized about trading for, him now being basically cut or going to be cut from the Warriors, according to one of their beat writers. That is something that obviously we will monitor. Another guy who could be available or who reportedly is available, this guy's always available, is John Collins. So John Collins has been available for forever. I mentioned him on episodes last year about a possible front court fit with Jaren Jackson Jr. I was actually really surprised with the acquisition cost for John Collins last year. The Hawks gave him away. And what's worse is the Jazz traded almost nothing for him and then also basically immediately regretted it. So all of those things, red flags for John Collins. However, with the Grizzlies' gaping hole in the front court and with John Collins somewhat rediscovering his shooting stroke last year, John Collins, talent-wise, basketball fit-wise, is an interesting option for the Grizzlies. Again, if he's free, I think he makes your team better. But of course, John Collins makes a lot of money. John Collins is owed nearly $27 million for the upcoming season, and that has a player option for the 2025-2026 season. He's not that good, okay? If he were good, I think other teams would have tried to get him. But like the Jazz, they tried to trade him last year. Then they started winning some games. He started playing a little bit better. Maybe they decided they didn't need to, actively try to move him. But now, once again, it seems like they're completely open / want to get rid of him. They would rather have the cap space that they used on John Collins. The positives for John Collins He can score. He finishes lobs. His three-point shooting stroke, again, it returned. He had some big issues shooting three-pointers his final season in Atlanta. I'm a little bit still concerned about it, though, because if you look at his shooting splits last year, basically before the All-Star break, he was bad at shooting threes, and then after the All-Star break, he got better. Now, one way you could spin that is you could say, oh, he finally got adjusted to the thumb problems he'd been having, and, you know, he worked through it and finally rediscovered his shooting stroke. Another way you could spin it is saying, hey, when the games mattered, he couldn't make shots. When the games didn't matter, when the Jazz started tanking, he started hitting his shots. So I don't know what the right interpretation of those numbers are, but I do continue to get tempted by the idea of John Collins as a scoring big, someone who can help on the glass, not an ideal rebounder, but for a team that's starved for offense, he seems like an interesting pairing with Jaren Jackson Jr. But then again, we get to the big salary, and how would you make that even work? Once again, to match the salary, I guess you'd have to pick up Luke Kennard's option and then also include Zaire Williams and John Conchar, and I don't even know if the Jazz would have enough roster spots available to do a trade like that where you send them 3 of your players, and I don't know necessarily if this is the guy that would be the one where you would, again, go right up to the first apron or over the first apron for this particular player. And then what happens if he opts out or if you have to pay him down the line? Is it even worth it? Again, if you consider the acquisition cost being possibly nothing, or if the Jazz even think you're helping them out, well, then I think no harm, no foul. If you have to pay some luxury tax this season, and if he opts out for next season, no big deal. If it only costs you, say, Luke Kennard, who maybe you're going to decline his option anyway. If it costs you Luke Kennard plus Zaire, are you going to re-sign Zaire, the following season? Trending towards no. Conchar, whatever. You can find another Conchar, is my opinion. Now, an easier way to match the salary, of course, would be by including Marcus Smart. But even though John Collins plays a position of much greater need, you wouldn't trade Marcus Smart for John Collins. Marcus Smart has much more trade value than John Collins. But consider this. The Jazz, in addition to having been reported that they want to move John Collins, they've also let leak that they are willing to trade the 10th pick in the draft for a win-now player. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? What if the Jazz offered the Grizzlies the 10th pick, the 32nd pick, and John Collins for Marcus Smart and the 39th pick? I think that's an intriguing trade idea. I don't know if the Jazz would do it, but the Jazz could certainly use a Marcus Smart if they're truly trying to win now around Lauri Markkanen. And again, grain of salt with all these reports about players being available and picks being available. Whatever the Jazz are doing this offseason, I think is a complete mystery. There's some talks of them moving Walker Kessler. There's some talks of them being open to moving Lauri Markkanen. There's also talks of them wanting to build around Lauri Markkanen. But like, if the Jazz offered you the 10th pick and John Collins for Marcus Smart, I mean, you'd have to have a meeting about that at least. The Grizzlies could then use the 9th and 10th picks. You could get maybe a big man option. You could get, one of these guards that maybe you think you don't want another small guard, but like any of these guys, you get a Ron Holland and a Dalton Connect. That is intriguing to me. I don't know if I would do it, but I think that's worth mentioning. And like you move up, like say you move up from the 39th pick also again to the 32nd pick. So you improve your second round option. You get the 9th pick, the 10th pick, and the 32nd pick. Maybe you use all those to package to move up even higher. Maybe you're really coveting Donovan Clingan and you're saying maybe we can move up and get him using this. I, as an amateur with the draft, would still be probably in favor of just taking more bites of the apple. Just getting 2 lottery guys, seeing if one of those guys panned out. Do you keep that 32nd pick and pick up one of these, other guys? Maybe that's how you get, some of the bigs in this draft. Like I keep saying, again, I haven't gone over all the prospects by any stretch of the imagination. But like I keep seeing this guy, Deron Holmes. Everyone seems to be pretty high on him. And like maybe you could get him with the 32nd pick. He sounds like a great option for the Grizzlies. But still, with some of the talk that Zach Lowe has said about the Grizzlies actually liking this draft. Could you see them picking up the 10th pick from the Jazz? That one, again, it's intriguing. It's something I hadn't really considered before, but I think, it sounds feasible to me. Now, beyond players who've been reported as being available, there have been reports, specifically from Kevin O'Connor, that 3 teams are trying to move up into the top 10. Those teams are the Toronto Raptors, who have the 19th pick, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have the 20th pick, and also the Trailblazers, who the Trailblazers, of course, are in the top 10 with the 7th pick. They also have the 14th pick, and KOC is saying those guys all want to move up into the top 10. Now, I think as Grizzlies people, the alarm bells go off when we say, oh, the Cavaliers want to trade into the top 10. Well, that's very interesting because, of course, we've been talking a lot about Jared Allen. And I'm not saying Jared Allen's a panacea for all the Grizzlies' woes. I'm not even saying he's an ideal fit. I do not think he's an ideal fit. But I do believe if the Grizzlies got Jared Allen and were able to keep, Ja, Des, Jaren, and keep Marcus, don't know if that's possible, but if you keep Brandon Clark and G.G. Jackson and Vince Williams Jr., adding Jared Allen makes you a very good team. You're going to, I think, comfortably win, 50 games, 55 games, around there each season while those guys are all on the team and while those guys are all healthy. Of course, that's a big caveat. But like that, obviously, this report the Cavaliers want to get up into the top 10, you once again pitch them, all right, we'll give you 9. You give us Jared Allen. Also, can we get 20? Like, what are we talking about here? So I think that is super interesting. The Raptors won. All right, what do the Raptors want to move up to the top 10? I don't know, but hey, the Raptors have a lot of bigs. Would the Raptors give you Jakob Poeltl and the 19th pick for the 9th pick? Would you trade the 9th pick for Poeltl and 19? Also, the Raptors have the 31st pick. This could be a similar situation that I pitched with the Jazz. You upgrade your second-round pick from 39 to 31, and then you drop down from 9 to 19. Can you pick up Jakob Poeltl? Jakob Poeltl, he makes $19.5 million per season. That is a little bit pricey. Matching salary, once again, the issues or the obstacle there. If you pick up the Luke Kennard option, Luke Kennard plus Conchar, that would get it done. Luke Kennard plus Zaire, that would get it done. Would you trade Luke Kennard and Zaire Williams and the 9th pick for Jakob Poeltl, the 19th pick, the 31st pick? I think it's a very fair trade. Completely intriguing. Jakob Poeltl, not an ideal fit. Zero spacing player as far as shooting. He's a very good screener. He's a good passer. He, in my mind, he simulates a lot of the stuff that you had with Steven Adams. He's a superb rebounder. Poeltl's the superior shot blocker. They have similar, I think, effective passing chops. They are both horrible free throw shooters. So, like, Jakob Poeltl, again, theoretical trade, Jakob Poeltl, the 19th pick and the 31st pick for Luke Kennard, the 9th pick, the 39th pick, and then you probably throw in either an Aldama or a Zaire or a Conchar to make the money work. Now, making the money work is easier if you pick up another guy on the Raptors, another center, Kelly Olynyk. Now, frankly, I don't feel like 9 and 39 for Olynyk, 19 and 31 is equitable. I think the Grizzlies are paying too much, dropping from 9 to 19 for a guy like Kelly Olynyk, who's not a clear-cut starter in the NBA. But also, maybe the Grizzlies would covet a guy like Olynyk, who has size and great shooting ability, also has decent passing. I mean, he's a good passer. He's an okay dribbler for his size. Maybe as an ideal fit in the Grizzlies' potential new scheme, you would covet a guy like Kelly Olynyk, but it still feels like a hefty price to trade down from 9 to 19 to get Olynyk. But maybe there's something there, again, where you could work something out. I don't know exactly what it would be to make that trade make more sense. Now, the Blazers won. All right, the Blazers, if they wanted to just move from 14 to 9 and pick up a 2nd pick in the top 10, I think the name you would look at is Robert Williams, Time Lord. And of course, Robert Williams got injured last season. He gets injured almost every season. He missed basically the whole year. He got injured running into Jaren Jackson Jr., unluckily enough. Time Lord and 14 for the 9th pick, it's fair. I think that's fair. I don't know if the Blazers would give away Robert Williams. Maybe they don't want the headache of another big. Maybe they think they're going to draft a big. A lot of people are saying their 7th pick is like the floor of where donovanclingan might fall. But if you have DeAndre Ayton, you maybe draft a big. You also have Duop Reith. You don't really need Robert Williams. And the Grizzlies, of course, need a guy. If Robert Williams is healthy, and of course it's a ridiculous thing to say, but if he's healthy, that's a very interesting guy to be on the Grizzlies in their front court. He doesn't make that much money. He signed basically a discounted salary because of his injury concerns. But like, he's a lob finisher. He's a shot blocker. He's also, I feel like, maybe an underrated passer. So Robert Williams and 14 for the 9th pick, you could take Robert Williams into that Steven Adams traded player exception. You probably have to decline Luke Kennard's option at that point, but like that, I think it's fair. Also, this is the same situation. The Blazers have the 34th pick in the 2nd round. You can move it from 39 to 34. So you send out the 9th and 39th pick. You pick up the 14th pick, the 34th pick, and Robert Williams. Totally fair trade. It accomplishes the Blazers' goal of moving into the top 10. You still would need to add a big, because I don't think we can depend on Robert Williams' health. Now, another trade option, which I hadn't really considered, but I think Chris Harrington gave me this idea, is Mitchell Robinson, because the Knicks, I mean, maybe the Knicks are going to get outbid for Isaiah Hartenstein. There's a report that the Thunder are going to make a hefty run at him and steal him from the Knicks with a big overpay. But like, maybe the Knicks, because of valuing Isaiah Hartenstein, because of wanting to pay other players, maybe you could get Mitchell Robinson from the Knicks. I think an interesting proposition. It feels fair to me, but it would be a massive trade down, would be the Grizzlies sending the 9th pick to the Knicks for Mitchell Robinson, plus some matching salary. You could get there pretty easily. And then you pick up Mitchell Robinson and maybe both of the Knicks first rounders, which are the 24th and 25th picks. Maybe at that point, you got to settle for a Deron Holmes or a Filipowski. Maybe Kel'el Ware or Yves Missy drops down there if you're looking at a big. Maybe a guy like Tristan Da Silva, some other players like that are available. If you do like this draft and you feel like you can get a useful player that late in the first round, you would consider something like that. Of course, Mitchell Robinson has his own share of injury concerns. He also does not help your spacing situation. And in my mind, he is a very poor passer. I mean, even when you think about that Blazers idea, like maybe you feel like at 14, you can get the guy who you value the most. If it is Devin Carter or whomever else, Jared McCain or something, you think that guy's going to be available at 14, and I can also pick up a potential answer in the front court, you would do that Blazers trade. Now let's take a quick break, and then I will come back, and I'm going to talk briefly about those 2 games last year where all of the Grizzlies' wings and guards were healthy. I'm going to remind you exactly what happened and what it looked like. All right, so when I think about the Grizzlies next year, I think about the roster and what the rotation might look like. I feel pretty confident in a lot of the things on the roster, and I feel like most of us feel this way. Absent a massive groundbreaking trade, let's say most of these guys are going to be back. We look at jamorant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark, and then Vince Williams Jr. and Gigi Jackson. We're like, oh, that's a pretty good top 7, top 8. I feel very confident about that. Of course, we need to pick up, another big, but when we don't think about the bigs, we think about this rotation of guards and wings is pretty good. And, if it hadn't been for injuries last year, things could have been way different, and we would have gotten a glimpse of what that was. Well, I'm going to tell you that last year, there were 2 games where actually the Grizzlies were 100% healthy, not counting the front court, not counting Steven Adams and Brandon Clark. As far as I can tell, there were 2 games last year where we had our full complement of players. And I thought it was interesting to look at these games. They occurred on December 31st, New Year's Eve. It was a game against the Kings, and then a couple days later, they had a home game against the Spurs. And in these games, the Grizzlies had jamorant and Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart and Vince Williams Jr. and Gigi Jackson and Luke Kennard and Derrick Rose. And so if you think about next year, And let's say you think the Grizzlies are going to keep Luke Kennard. Let's say the Grizzlies do keep Luke Kennard. We think about this guard rotation is going to be possibly exactly the same as it was in these games. And we look to next year, I think we all say, all right, here are the guys who are going to play. If we have a 9 or 10-man rotation next season, the guards and wings that are going to play are, of course, Jamorant, Desmond Bane, and Marcus Smart, then G.G. Jackson, Vince Williams Jr., and Luke Kennard. I think that would be close to a consensus opinion. Like, you're leaving out Conchar, you're leaving out LaRavia, you're giving a DMP to Zaire Williams and to Derrick Rose. I think, again, you think about the rotation for next year, your top 6 guards and wings, Jamorant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, G.G. Jackson, Vince Williams Jr., Luke Kennard. I feel like that's consensus. That leaves either 3 or 4 spots for your front court. That would make a 9-man or 10-man rotation. If it's Jaren and Brandon and Santi, that's a good 9-man rotation. If it's, big who you draft, plus Santi, Jaren, and Brandon, all right, that's a 10-man rotation. So that's what I think we all assume would likely happen in a rotation for next year. Well, I don't know if this is predictive, but when you look at those games last season where all your guards and wings were available, here's the players that played. The Grizzlies played a 9-man rotation in the home game against the Kings on December 31st. Now, an important bit of context is this is before G.G. Jackson was basically allowed to play. I believe G.G. Jackson was assigned to the hustle for this game. So there's no G.G. Jackson. But this is after Vince Williams Jr. had demonstrated that he was a very useful player. Vince Williams Jr. had already started 3 games alongside Ja Morant, where the Grizzlies won all of them, and Vince played around 35 minutes in each of those games. So Vince Williams Jr. had already demonstrated his efficacy on the team. The players that played in this game, they started Ja, Desmond, and Marcus, of course. Then they started Jaren Jackson Jr., and they started Bismack Biyombo. Shout out Bismack Biyombo. The team had Santi Aldama and Xavier Tillman available, but they decided to start and play Biyombo, those front court minutes. If you need a reminder why they did that, Tillman and Aldama had been playing very poorly. And they just felt like they needed any kind of big in there to screen and rebound. So they started what makes total sense. Ja, Des, Marcus, Jaren, and Biyombo. Off the bench, though, they played Derrick Rose, Luke Kennard, Vince Williams Jr., and Santi Aldama. The reason I find that very, very surprising is I, at the time, found it shocking when the guards were fully healthy that Derrick Rose still played. Derrick Rose played backup point guard minutes. Marcus Smart did not play any backup point guard minutes. He shared all of his minutes with Ja Morant. So, like, you can consider Vince Williams Jr. like a wing if you want, or a forward. He's more of a guard to me, but it doesn't really matter. But they basically played 5 to 6 guards. They played small ball. They played Bismack Biyombo, heavy minutes. They played Jaren, heavy minutes. And then they played, at the very least, a 5-guard rotation of Ja, Des, Marcus, Luke, and Derrick. They did not play Tillman. They did not play Zaire Williams. They did not play John Conchar. All those guys got DMPs. Of course, G.G. Jackson was on the hustle. Jake LaRavia was on the hustle. At the time, you can go back and listen to my podcast about it or watch my podcast about it. I was very surprised. They played a 5 or 6 guard lineup. They played small ball. Oh, and by the way, they got annihilated in this home game against the Kings. They lost by 30. This was the game where they got 1 offensive rebound for the game. Again, the depth chart was off the bench. Your first 2 guards in were Derrick Rose and Luke Kennard. Vince Williams Jr. came in after those guys. In the third quarter, when they were losing significantly, Vince Williams Jr. did not come in. They switched over to David Roddy. So they played, again, small ball. They took Derrick Rose and Luke Kennard off the bench to back up a 3-guard starting lineup of Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart. Like, maybe that isn't that interesting to you. I still find it interesting. I don't think it's what I would have done at all. I would have played either a big. I would have played Tillman, who got a DMP until Biyombo got hurt in the second half. I would have played either Tillman as a big, as a fourth big, or I would have played John Conchar as like a connective piece as a rebounder. I would have even played Zaire Williams just as a wing with some size instead of playing all of these small ball lineups. So they lost that game. The next game, they did the exact same thing. They started jamorant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Bismack Biyombo. They did increase Vince Williams Jr.'s minutes. Credit to the coaching staff for adapting, but they still played Derrick Rose and Luke Kennard off the bench. It was still what I'm calling a 6-guard rotation. They played smallish lineups, and they beat the Spurs. The Spurs at that point were 5-27. They beat the Spurs by 8 at home. Now, maybe they learned throughout the year that, hey, listen, we made a mistake not playing Vince Williams Jr. in those games because, of course, they played him lots of minutes later in the year. They also discovered G.G. Jackson later in the year. So maybe next year, if all those same players are healthy, they will give a DMP to Derrick Rose. They will not do all of these small ball lineups. Maybe they will depend more on Desmond Bane as a backup point guard. Maybe they'll actually play Marcus Smart as a backup point guard. But I do not like that last year when all of the guards and wings were available, they went small ball, they played a 6-guard rotation. Now, the game after this, so they got blown out by the Kings at home. They beat the Spurs by 8 at home. The next game, so Derrick Rose got injured in the Spurs game. So the next game was a home game against the Raptors. They actually didn't have Vince Williams Jr. in this game either. So they once again started jamorant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart. Luke Kennard played significant minutes off the bench. They had to turn to Roddy and Zaire in this game. And this was a home game against the Raptors. And guess what? They lost that game too. You had jamorant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Luke Kennard all available. They lost that game as well. So it's not great. I know we highlighted that the Grizzlies were 6-3 last year when jamorant played. Of course, they won the first 4 games with jamorant in the rotation. 3 of those games were fourth quarter comebacks. And then after that, it was very up and down. And I don't feel like they had a good grasp on how to fully utilize the roster at that point. They leaned too heavily, in my opinion, on guards. Now, what does that mean for this offseason? What does it mean for next year? Possibly nothing. But I did at least remind myself that when I'm dreaming about what the rotation might look like next year, I could always be wrong because I don't always see eye to eye with the coaching staff on the players they play. And we keep thinking about like, all right, next year, Derrick Rose is probably not going to be in the rotation. We don't know that. When he was healthy, they played him. There were very few healthy DMPs for Derrick Rose, if I remember correctly. So I don't know what that means for roster acquisition. I don't know what that means for trades next year. I mean, maybe it means that a lot of those guys, they understand they don't need Zaire and Conchar and LaRavia because they already have Vince Williams Jr., G.G. Jackson. And guess what? When the team was healthy last year, they wouldn't play any of those guys. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it means they want to go get Rob Dillingham because they don't mind having a bunch of small guards. But anyways, I thought it was interesting. Maybe you think it's less interesting, but I had forgotten that when the team was healthy last year, they did a very small ball-ish thing where they played 3 bigs and 6 guards. And frankly, I do not love that. Finally, I guess I should mention that Jerry West passed away this morning at the age of 86. Of course, Jerry West was in the Grizzlies front office. Frankly, he brought the Grizzlies into respectability. The Grizzlies franchise had never won 30 games in a season before Jerry West was hired. And with Jerry West, the Grizzlies ended up making the playoffs several seasons in a row, 3 seasons in a row. They won 50 games for the first time with Jerry West as their lead executive. Jerry West won Executive of the Year for his work on the Grizzlies. Also, Jerry West, of course, went on to say on a podcast not too long ago that he told Kobe Bryant not to sign with the Grizzlies when Kobe Bryant was a free agent. This is when Jerry West was working for the Grizzlies. Jerry West said that he told Kobe not to sign with the Grizzlies. I don't know if that's true at all, but it's a story Jerry West told. There's also a tale about how when he gave Brian Cardinal the full mid-level exception, or it was like a massive contract back then, apparently the owner, Michael Heisley, was badgering Jerry West about why he hadn't signed anybody. And Jerry West picked up the phone, called Brian Cardinal's agent, and said, hey, will you accept this massive contract? And that's how the Grizzlies ended up with the janitor, Brian Cardinal. Again, I don't know if that tale is true either. It's just a story I've been told. But anyways, Jerry West passed away. Rest in peace. Condolences to his friends and family. He was, of course, a very important figure in the history of the NBA, of course, but also in the history of the Memphis Grizzlies. Anyways, that's all for today. Let me know what you think about those trades that I mentioned in the first half of the episode. I think they're all very interesting. If any of them happened, I would nod my head and I could be like, okay, I can get behind this. But I'm curious what you guys think. Anyways, if you want to support this show and get some bonus content, you can do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Come join the Grits and Grinds Slack channel. It's a lot of fun in there as we count down the days to the draft. Join again at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right. Hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.